What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that here as we're recapping Week 14 Sunday slate, it is Chris Allen. Chris, what's going on, buddy?
Oh man, it's just been another day of just crazy action. I'm sure we'll get to all the fun that my Bengals put me through, of course, and everything else that goes with even trying to just produce the show. I can't even get on this show without some chaos going on. So if the Week 14 was any indication of how things were going to go, that's where I'm currently sitting at here on Sunday night.
Yeah, apologies for the delay getting this thing live. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but like Chris said, that fits into the theme of Week 14 Sunday slate, which was indeed chaos, baby. Chaos ruled supreme. Here's the structure of the show, as it always is. We talk about the games we care most about in the first segment, plus our boom and bust players of the week. Second segment, that is the games that we sort of care about here on Sunday. And third segment, the games that we could have just strictly written an email about and kept it moving. So with that, let's first get into our boom and bust players of the week. Our boom player of the week, it is Bills quarterback Josh Allen, 37.8 fantasy points. That was more than anybody else scored in the early window here. Chris, I think this is the second time pretty recently we've given this award to Josh Allen, despite the fact that we are going to talk about some weird notes in his passing game profile when we get to that game here very shortly. He made it happen, as he always does, no matter what's going on around him.
Yeah, and of course we have to have the Bengals defense really not showing up in this one, at least from how often they were allowing Josh Allen to get loose. A couple of times it would have been nice to see them put a spy or something like that from a defensive perspective to limit his rushing, because that 40-yard touchdown scramble that he had was just nobody was there. And so seeing that level of production from Josh Allen really just cements the dual threat ability that you almost have to have, because in a game where we saw a couple of turnovers from Joe Burrow, it would have been nice if he would have had that same level of mobility to kind of keep the Bengals into it. So it's that threat that Allen has on a week-to-week basis that keeps him in that QB1 conversation. So it was good to see on his part.
78 rushing yards, 4 total touchdowns on the day for Josh Allen. You mentioned your Bengals defense. They allowed the tight ends to go crazy here. Even blocking tight end Jackson Hawes got into the mix with a touchdown there, because it's that kind of day for the Bengals defense, as it usually is. Speaking of that kind of day, another repeat offender in this segment, our bust player of the week, it's Justin Jefferson with just 2.1 fantasy points. And Chris, this really stings this week, because we can't just say, hey, well, J.J. McCarthy stunk up the joint. That didn't happen. J.J. McCarthy had a pretty damn good game against the Washington Commanders, who are obviously hopeless on defense. Of course, we know that. But 0.6 EPA per dropback for J.J. McCarthy, a really strong outing, easily his best performance of the week, of the season. And yet Justin Jefferson still lays a dud here in Week 14.
Of a controlled performance, and we'll talk more about the J.J. McCarthy of it all once we get to that game, but seeing it be more of a spread out passing attack and not really focused on the wide receivers, I think that leads to part of it. And also, again, we'll talk about it a bit more, how short or close to the line of scrimmage J.J. McCarthy was really targeting most of his pass catchers, which would leave a guy like Justin Jefferson, who performs more in that intermediate part of the field, him and Jordan Addison, kind of on the outs in terms of fantasy production. So I don't know if this is more of a referendum on Justin Jefferson or J.J. McCarthy or whatever, but at least I would be a little bit more confident in where the whole Vikings pass catching offense is at as a whole, just with J.J. McCarthy being able to play a little bit better, of course, against a worse defense in the Commanders.
Yeah, look, we got to give J.J. McCarthy credit. We will talk about that game much later. It was 31-0. I think I heard Scott Hansen say that the Minnesota Vikings are the first team in, I don't remember what the threshold was, but one of the first teams ever, or maybe the only team ever, to get shut out one week and then shut out another team in the following game. So it was the insane season for the 2025 Minnesota Vikings continues. Look, again, we'll talk about that game later, but you got to give J.J. McCarthy a lot of credit, but you made the point perfectly here that he was not getting the football down the field to the wide receivers in this one. This was mostly about the tight ends. Blocking tight end Josh Oliver scored. T.J. Hawkinson scored. It's a good game for McCarthy. It's a sign of progress for him after Max Brosmer had the worst starting quarterback performance we've seen from an adjusted yards per attempt perspective last week. So it's a sign of progress, but not enough to get J.J. McCarthy going with Justin Jefferson from a fantasy standpoint this week, which is obviously a bummer if you were counting on him to help you make that playoff push. But with that, Let's get into the games that we care about most, and we'll get into that Bills and Bengals game. Bills 39, Bengals 34. And Chris, I was thinking about you, buddy, when we had two just wild interceptions from Joe Burrow here that turned this game, because otherwise the Bengals were controlling this one early. T. Higgins was making plays, but again, ultimately those couple interceptions, which I don't know. What was your thought just on those two picks here real quick? Because to me, it was just like, that's just a couple of bad breaks there.
Yeah, the first one I would say was more on Joe Burrow than anything else. The second one, it's one of those. It's a tipped pass. I can understand
Yeah.
that. But then of course, if you try and layer a ball over a defender that's trying to on a screen pass, I mean, what else is he going to do? So I get that. Like the pick six was one of the, I would say, the tougher plays, and especially given the context of it's in the fourth quarter, they're trying to at least put away or at least take enough time off the clock so they can continue to force Buffalo to at least have some of the pass attempts that Josh Allen was having. Again, in the context of it, that was just the more brutal part. It's that there wasn't enough time for really the Bengals to try and get back into that game, and now having to do the back-to-back picks after that, it just felt like the game was slipping away and it was completely over afterwards. I know they made a couple of attempts to try and come back, of course, with the second T. Higgins touchdown shortly thereafter, but it was just those two plays that really kind of, I guess, emphasize how thin the margins are for this Bengals offense, where if the things don't go completely right, it's just one play here or there that completely changes things, whether it's something on offense or even on defense where, yeah, they got Josh Allen on the ground a couple of times, but then it was a pass interference call, setting up a new set of first downs, or them not being able to contain Josh Allen and he would get off on the ground and create with his legs. So it was just, again, how quickly things can change for the Bengals on just a couple of plays, but that's really been the case for them throughout this season and kind of part of the reason for their downfall in 2024 too.
Yeah, for a minute there at the beginning of the game, I thought, hey, this Bengals defense, which played well against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens on Thanksgiving night, maybe they were carrying over that performance here. But ultimately, Josh Allen and the Bills score a bunch of points. We mentioned Allen was our boom player of the week. He had 4 total touchdowns in this one. James Cook, actually, I mean, he had a pretty good game from a stats perspective, 80 yards on the ground, 31 yards through the air, but he fumbled twice. He lost one at the goal line. So it was kind of a messy game from James Cook. And in the passing game, again, this is the crazy thing I wanted to talk with you about, Chris, is Josh Allen, he averaged 4.6 air yards per attempt in this game today. And since week 11, he's dead last in the NFL at 3.9. I mean, they have just completely given up on the downfield passing attack there in Buffalo. And you kind of understand it because you look at the route participation for these Bills players. You know, it's Gabe Davis leading the way in the rotation with 69% of the routes, averaging 0.8 yards per route and only target on 8% of his routes. So doing the sacrificial stuff there. And it was the tight ends that went crazy, as I mentioned, against your Bengals. 11 total catches by tight ends on 13 targets for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid got back in here after an injury. He led the way in the tight end room with 18 routes run. And like I said, Jackson Hawes, 3 routes on the day. He popped in a touchdown, and Dawson Knox scored as well.
Yeah, and that's where I could see where it's not just the lack of a true wide receiver one for Josh Allen, but then of course the type of game plan that you would want to have against the Bengals secondary, where you know that a lot of the lapses in coverage for them, whether if assuming that it's not going to be the person guarded by DJ Turner, who really is their only lone bright spot on defense, you should be able to get by a Dax Hill. You should be able to force either some of the Bengals defensive their front, either the linebackers into coverage, which you know we've all seen a number of other, whether it's tight ends or running backs, continue to get by. So that's where I can understand, at least in this particular game, where Josh Allen will be able to just use his running backs and tight ends in order to create most of the production he needed in order to secure the win for the Bills. But I can see this continuing forward with any other team that tries to press against Cincinnati, just for the way that the defense is set up. It's really just they can limit some wide receiver production, but it's really every other positional group that can really do a lot of damage to the Bengals from a defensive standpoint. So, I mean, if you were rostering a guy like Khalil Shakir, good to see the fact that Josh Allen can hang in the pocket and make a crazy throw in the back of the end zone in order for Shakir to make it there. Yeah, that was good. But outside of that, it's just one of those offenses where it's really not as structured around the wide receiver position as it used to when Josh Allen had a guy like Stephon Diggs at his side.
No, and it hasn't been for a minute. They don't have a wide receiver one. I don't think they have a wide receiver two on this roster. I think it's like a collection of three, fours, and guys who would be on the practice squad for other teams. Big win for the Bills here to then go into another big game in Week 15 in New England against the division-leading New England Patriots coming out of their bye week. Let's flip it to the Bengals here. Actually kind of a lot of interesting things on the Bengals offense here, starting with though, a monster T. Higgins game, despite the fact, Chris, that he was in and out of this one, leads the team with 11 targets and just some insane catches down the football field. I believe Joe Burrow threw all 4 of his touchdowns on passes that went 10 plus yards in the air today. So they really accessed that downfield passing game specifically to T. Higgins, who missed last week's game with a concussion.
Yeah, but the crazy thing, every time I saw him going up for a catch, it always seemed to be that his body would come down on his back and then he'd wind up hitting the back of his head. I think it was the first time towards the back end of the first quarter where he catches the ball out of bounds along the left sideline. He hits his head and he's just sitting there. And of course, everybody watching it in real time is like, okay, well, this is going to be a re-aggravation of the concussions he sustained a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to go through. And I think he even shortly afterwards, you could see on the replay, he pointed to his head shortly after that. And it was like, okay, so now there's a concern. But then it happened 2 more times, like during that game. He came out of the locker room at the start of the second half late. But he was there for the first drive because the Bills had the ball. But there were multiple times where it's just any time that he fell down, it just happened to be on his back and they wound up hitting his head. So I'm hoping that this isn't something that's going to be reoccurring for him. It didn't sound like there was enough of a setback that he's going to have to go back into the concussion protocol. But still, good enough for Joe Burrow to trust his wide receiver 2 and T. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where as you're watching it and just knowing that this is going to be a potential thing for Higgins, at least moving forward, it's just hard to watch at times. Good to watch him get into the end zone, but hard to watch at times.
Yeah, we're showing the quote on the screen here from T. Higgins saying, quote, "I'm a soldier. Soldiers take hits. It happens. It's football. It's just the name of the game. Just got to get up, next play mentality." And I mean, obviously that's what a football player is going to say. My thought, and you pointed this out, just him hitting his head. Number one, it was the first play that he hit his head as he came down for like a jump ball. That looked exactly like the play in week 12 that he hit his head on and then obviously sustained the concussion. It was so similar. And the player that I thought of was Mike Williams, Chargers wide receiver. He would go up for these insane contested catches down the field, but he would come back and slam his head on the turf, slam his back on the turf. And obviously we know that Mike Williams just retired earlier in August of this year because it was just too much damage to his body. And a guy who was only, playing, not that he was, ancient or anything. It was kind of a shorter career for Mike Williams because of those injuries. So you hope that doesn't happen to T. Higgins. Like you said, you want to continue to see him out there, but an insane game from him here today. Other things we learned from a fantasy perspective, the backfield, which we talked a lot about on Fantasy Football Live today, it was clearly Chase Brown as the lead back here. 68% of the running back touches, 66% of the snap. He got the 1 touch inside the 5-yard line. Samaje Perine chipped in for 32% of the running back touches and 38% of the snaps. So, yeah, I mean, again, you'd like to see Chase Brown have a bigger rushing day against this Bengals defense, but he does get away with the touchdown here. And ultimately, Chris, like, where are we at with Chase Brown as a fantasy player with Samaje Perine back after getting 2 weeks of data on it?
At least for me, I'm still looking at him as a RB1, but still more of that fringe top 12 player versus a guy that if you have him in your roster, you have zero concerns about what he can do from a production standpoint. Because I think to your point, it's almost like they want to try and use him the same way that the Rams are switching out Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, where you do have an understanding of what the roles are between Samaje Perine and what Chase Brown offers and how often or where they're going to use him once they get on the field. You see Samaje Perine come in on third downs, 2-minute roll, obvious passing situations. And it's not to say that Perine is bad. He picked up a number of first downs, had at least one explosive run in this game, if I remember correctly. I think it was just short of maybe like 9 or 10 yards, but enough to help them move the chains and set up manageable down and distances for Joe Burrow. So he's still a solid running back too in order to help the offense continue to move the chains. It's just that when they need those explosives, you know that Chase Brown has the ability to do that. If they're looking for a receiving option, Chase Brown can do that too. We saw him get a receiving touchdown earlier today. So that's where, as I was talking earlier during Fantasy Football Live, during the Numbers Live segment, about it's not just the snaps, but where are these guys being used at on the field. And if you have a running back like Chase Brown, who, yeah, he's going to cede some snaps to Samaje Perine in some of those situations, but if he's getting used in the goal line, he's getting also being used in the receiving game as well. He should still at least have the floor and the potential ceiling because of his explosive nature in order to really still be in that RB1 conversation week to week.
My last thing on this game is that Mike Gesicki, maybe a little bit of a tight end streamer. I mean, Jamar Chase is never going to have, not going to have these down games very often, so maybe that's what happened here with Mike Gesicki. Only ran around on 43% of the dropbacks, but targeted on 38% of those routes. 81% snaps in the slot. So he's, as we know, Mike Gesicki's not really a tight end. He's basically just a slot receiver. Caught all 6 targets for 86 yards and a touchdown. So definitely somebody that if you're hurting for tight end help, Gesicki, now that he's back out there, he's been banged up for most of this year. You can probably pull up him in your lineup there with Joe Burrow along the way. But let's get to the next, the big divisional game here. Packers 28, Bears 21. This one ended not too long ago, so we're still kind of reacting to this one here in the moment. But Packers pull off the big win here, Chris. Jordan Love, 3 touchdowns in this one. We learned a lot about this offense, but what'd you see from the Packers here today?
It's just so unnecessary with the off the back foot throws from Jordan Love. Do we have to keep watching? I can't, man, because it's always fun to watch in the moment, but I'm almost thinking one of these days where it's just, if that ball is just going to fall completely off target or it's going to turn into an interception. But at least in this game, we were still able to see Christian Watson lead the way from a touchdown and also production standpoint. I mean, we were talking about him earlier today where, yes, Jaden Reed being there and also Matthew Golden being active would probably take away some of his upside, but you can see the way that Love likes to play a guy like Christian Watson, who, again, I cannot say this enough. I mean, the man had an ACL tear surgery this calendar year, and he's out here doing this. I mean, able to just completely break off guys at the stem of his routes and gain separation on some of those either slants or crossing patterns. I mean, Watson's second touchdown, I thought, was just one of those. I mean, you are a true athlete and a solid wide receiver at that position where you can create that level of separation, just create an explosive on just what seemed to be just a pedestrian type of route. But when you have a guy like Watson doing it, and of course Love to execute the throw, that's what you get. But outside of that, good to see Jaden Reed getting mixed in, not just as a slot receiver, but also on a couple of like end arounds or getting the ball in his hands fairly quickly. So I'm assuming at some point over the next couple of weeks, we should see his route share start to tick up and also his targets as well. But those are the 2 big takeaways, at least for me, from the Packers passing game.
Yeah, some of that fadeaway stuff is rough from Jordan Love, but it's also a big reason why some of the numbers that we showed today about like his work against the blitz was so good, because he'd be just seconds away from getting clobbered back there, and he's able to do that fadeaway throw. So it's a live by the sword, die by the sword. He is that type of quarterback. That is who Jordan Love is. And look, the Packers have been doing a lot of living by that sword lately, ever since that kind of those 2 games where they got upset by the Panthers, and then they had that disgusting game, I think it was Monday night, against the Eagles. Ever since then, this offense has definitely been clicking, and Christian Watson's emergence is a huge part of this. I'm glad you brought him up here. I mean, he was number 1 in terms of route percentage for the Green Bay Packers today, only 73%, so they did rotate a little bit. It was classic Packers receivers that we had. Christian Watson, who's, I think, to me, playing the best football of his career, period. Which is, as you said, insane that he tore his ACL in January. I don't think he's ever looked better than this, particularly against man coverage. Today had 72 yards and a touchdown, and both of his touchdowns, against man coverage in this one. Absolutely electric stuff. 21.6 miles per hour on the catch and run touchdown against man coverage here, as Rob Demoski is showing us on the screen. He tore his ACL in January. It's insane. So you have that. You got Romeo Doubs having a nice season as the X receiver. Didn't catch anything today, but he's having a nice season. You got Jaden Reed back off IR. You got Matthew Golden active for this game. You had Dontavian Wicks having the game of his friggin' life on Thanksgiving last week, and it was converted, cornerback wide receiver hybrid. Bo Melton catches a 45-yard touchdown on a sick throw from Jordan Love. Classic Packers receiver stuff. But I think what we did see here today is that there's a little bit of consolidation in this wide receiver room, which is Watson as the 1 primary outside receiver, Doubs as kind of the stationary X receiver, and then Jaden Reed runs a route on 62% of the dropbacks here, 25% targets per route. He got rush attempts as well. And he really did help them kind of activate some of that man coverage stuff. Not always as the targeted player, but he cleared out a lot of space on that play that Christian Watson gets wide open, or not gets wide open, but has that huge runway down the middle of the field that we showed earlier with the next gen stats dots. So just having that full arsenal here makes a huge difference for the Packers offense.
Without a doubt. And of course, when you still have a running back like Josh Jacobs, or even when it was Emmanuel Wilson spelling them, the play call and the design of the offense is good enough such that Jordan Love won't always see those, let's say, long down and distance situations once you get into third down, because let's say even this game where Josh Jacobs was mostly bottled up through like a lot of the early down runs, you still have Jordan Love able to get the ball out to Jaden Reed on a couple of third downs. He had one to Reed on the left sideline where it's like he just flicks the ball out there. There's Jaden Reed and picks up like 6 or 7 yards in order to move the chains. Afterwards, he had a deep shot to Luke Musgrave that got overturned on replay. But even those types of ancillary receivers that can pop up just for a play or two, that allows them to get the ball, convert the series, and then, of course, then he gets back to Christian Watson. He gets back to Jaden Reed, and then, of course, having Josh Jacobs there working as well. It's just every one of their skill players right now at least play well enough in their roles that it just all intersects at Jordan Love. So it is fun to watch, but like you were saying earlier, you live by the sword, die by the sword. But right now, they really are living by it, and that's why they're able to pull off this win against the Bears.
Let's talk about those Bears here. Starting with the run game, 51.9% rushing success rate on the day. That was 5th best here in Week 14 so far, and yet they did not break a run longer than 9 yards. No 10-plus yard runs on the day for these Bears running backs. So you can kind of call that bottled up for this committee here, but still 82 yards for DeAndre Swift, 57 for Kyle Monangai. So they moved it. They just didn't have any big plays, which put a lot of burden on Caleb Williams in the passing game. And Chris, it was rough in the first half. 6 of 14 completion rate in the first half for Caleb Williams, but 13 of 21 in the second half, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the interception that ended the game ultimately, which was a 4th down kind of heave into the end zone. So I don't know. I come away feeling okay about the Bears passing game. You know, this was close. It was a competitive game. They used a ton of play action in the second half. 134 of Caleb Williams' 144 yards came on play action in the second half. So they really leaned into that despite the run game not ripping off these big plays. And his sack evasion, I thought, was really on display in this one as well. 16 pressures, just 1 sack, according to Next Gen Stats for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and I know we talked maybe 2-3 weeks ago just about how much we can at least try and at least attest to the structure that Ben Johnson wants to create for that offense. But, Caleb Williams likes to play out of structure. And I also honestly thought that this was probably the best marriage of how much Caleb Williams likes to play that backyard boot action type of structure for the passing game, where you saw him rolling out of the pocket almost drop back after drop back, and that's where it allows him to kind of create out of structure or create on the fly. And that's where a couple of passes down the right sideline, or even that touchdown, his sidearm throw touchdown to Olamide Zaccheaus, I thought it was an interception first off, and then the fact that he was able to get that throw through, I think it was it Keyshawn Nixon's hands, I believe, in order to complete the touchdown throw. But it's stuff like that where I would say I almost came away a little bit more confident that this marriage between Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams is going to work, because he's finding ways to at least keep Caleb Williams in that mentality of, I can still create, I can still do things down the field. So even without Rome Odunze on the field, seeing him work and access some of, like, whether it was Cole Kmet, whether it was, of course, Colston Loveland, that's where I at least see how this offense can continue to be somewhat efficient from the pass game perspective. But I think it's all pretty much predicated on how well they can perform on the ground.
Yeah, no question. The other throw that was crazy from Williams today was the Cole Kmet, like, down the right sideline play as he was getting out of the pocket. That was an unbelievable throw from Caleb Williams. But, the accuracy does have to get better at some point. There's no question. But the flashes are really high for Williams. And this was, again, an overall very rocky game, but the second half was encouraging. You mentioned no Rome Odunze. He was not available in Week 14. He might not be available for a while. He's got a stress fracture that this sneaking suspicion for me that he's been playing with a foot injury, stress fracture in his foot. I don't know. He might miss a few more weeks with that. That is not an easy injury to just play through. Although Jaden Reed, I think, tried to play through a foot a foot fracture at some point this early this year, and he was playing through it, but I don't know. We'll see. So with no Rome Odunze in this game, I had a sneaking suspicion this might happen and people would be upset about it. They basically just took no Rome Odunze and put Olamide Zaccheaus into his vacated move around inside out role and really didn't change the deployment for DJ Moore or Luther Burden. You know, my point about Odunze this year is that he has been handling a lot of roles in the offense from like a pre-snap move around perspective in the blocking game. And like Zaccheaus is the veteran receiver that they like, the trusted guy. So they didn't really change anything for Burden or DJ Moore. Burden was still efficient when he got the ball and when he was targeted, but he did not play more. 64% route participation, and DJ Moore kind of continues to unfortunately be a little bit of a nothing burger in this offense.
Yeah, and that was something of a surprise for me because I know everybody's been excited to see how much more Luther Burden can really take on this offense, especially after, what was it, week 3, week 4, when he caught that deep flea flicker for a touchdown. And it's just like, we want more of that. We want more of the explosives. We want more of we essentially just want more of Burden and less of Zaccheaus or even DJ Moore to some extent. But still, I'm kind of with you where it's like, there has to be some level of understanding what the entirety of the offense is going to be. And I'm just wondering if Ben Johnson has some reservations about whether or not that's going to be the case for Burden, at least at this part of his career. So it's just, I would say I'm not too terribly surprised that this is where he's at, but still at the same time, it's good that with the extra opportunities that he had, we can see how he can fill into that wide receiver 2 role, if not towards over the last few games of this season, but definitely in 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, totally agree. I think 2026 will be the year that Luther Burden really breaks out, and we'll continue to see kind of flashes this year. So, yeah, that's kind of the way I'm viewing him. I don't think he's going to at some point emerge to be like a must-start player in fantasy because of just they're trying to grow him a little bit. And he flashes a lot of really good things, but there are some little kinks in his game that he does kind of need to iron out from a man coverage perspective, just running routes at the right depth, stuff like that. But still very promising rookie season, and I think a promising day for him today as a future prospect. Let's get to another divisional game here. This was Steelers 27, Ravens 22. Steelers, man, just when you think they're backed up into a corner, classic Steelers win here. DK Metcalf had a monster game, season high 36% target share for DK Metcalf. He had only been over 30% one other time this year. Frankly, he'd only been over like 28% one other time this year. Only more than 8 targets one other game this year. So I've been surprised that Metcalf is not inhaling more volume in this offense. He sure inhaled it today and had a monster game along with the rest of the Steelers offense, despite the fact that the running backs had just 32 yards on 14 carries.
Yeah, and this will look like almost vintage Aaron Rodgers in terms of how quickly he was just ripping that ball down the sidelines. I mean, whether it was to DK Metcalf or even seeing a couple of the other ancillary receivers pop up for a couple of gains here and there. I mean, 2.51 average time to throw, no sacks. So it really didn't matter what they were trying to throw at him, the Ravens defense from a defensive standpoint. I mean, it looked like, and also just looking at his next-gen stats chart, it looked like there was only maybe 4 to 5 attempts from Aaron Rodgers across the middle of the field. But looking at how well DK Metcalf was able to play on the perimeter, I can understand that because it was just time after time, it was either him or let's say maybe even Calvin Austin, like shaking loose and beating one of the Ravens defenders and just picking up chunk games here and there. And so, yeah, to your point, I mean, just 10 targets for Metcalf or a little over 10 targets for him in this game. First time with double-digit targets since week 6 of last season. I mean, so that's crazy to think about how long it's been since we've really seen DK Metcalf get into that, like, just high-end, like, wide receiver 1 type of opportunity. 77% of the team's air yards. And I'm with you. I was also thinking that looking at the rest of the talent around him, we would have seen more games and more levels of opportunity for him. But at least good enough to do that, especially in a divisional win that they needed to have.
Oh, man, a few inbreakers there on the DK Metcalf route chart, but a lot of just like verticals down the field. So it's been a strange year for the Steelers offense. It's been a strange marriage with a lot of these weird bedfellows here. And yet, pretty good game here against a division rival. The Ravens, meanwhile, they put up 22 points. Lamar Jackson did bounce back from a fantasy perspective, had himself a nice game. Could have been even better if the Isaiah Likely touchdown, did he make a football move? Did he not? It could have been better if that play stood, and yet it did not stand. The real hero for the Ravens today was Zay Flowers, who had 124 receiving yards of Lamar Jackson's 219 passing yards.
Yeah, and looking at it, seeing Lamar in the first half didn't really look all that well. I mean, just 64 passing yards by the end
No.
of the second quarter, along with an interception and a sack. I mean, he scrambled a few times. I think he had maybe like 15, 20 rushing yards like off of those scrambles, but just didn't look completely right. But I agree that I could almost see Ian Hartitz tweeting out yet another reason why Lamar Jackson's day could have looked a little bit better just based off of the things that went wrong. Because what was it? Zay Flowers, he misses him, or like I think Flowers dropped a potential touchdown. Rashad Bateman dropped a touchdown, and of course the Isaiah
Yeah.
Likely no TD. We could have really been looking at Lamar Jackson being back into the QB1 status that we've expected out of him throughout the entire year. But for Zay Flowers, I mean, seeing it, it was just crossing routes, slants, out routes. I mean, you could really see just the level of route running that Zay Flowers, I think, honestly, I've seen out of him for the past couple of seasons really start to come on. But it was his first 100-yard game since week one. And so I'm hoping to see that this kind of the impetus for Lamar Jackson and honestly for Todd Monken to continue to keep Zay Flowers involved in this passing game, because throughout the middle parts of the season, it just seemed like he's been a ghost outside of maybe a few, I guess, explosive plays here and there.
Yeah. I don't really feel good about this Ravens offense, even with Lamar having a nice fantasy day. I thought Lamar was still a little off for a wide chunk of this game. Some of the pass catchers making mistakes, here and there. I don't know. The Ravens right now would be out of the playoffs if the season started today. If postseason started today, the Steelers, of course, are winning the division. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. I don't really have faith in any of these AFC North teams, but yeah, I don't view the Ravens as some sleeping giant at this point. Like, that dream is long dead. And I think they kind of need to have some serious conversations about this offense and what's happened to it this year, because they were just a juggernaut last season, and it's largely the same cast of characters. And I know Lamar obviously has been not 100% healthy even when he's been available for this year, but man, it has not been a fun season. Derrick Henry to our colleague Jory Epstein today, Ravens 3-5 record at home. Derrick Henry says it hurts. Just defend your home turf. Definitely should have a better record at home. Yeah, a lot of things should be going better for the Baltimore Ravens, and they are not right now. Speaking of things that were better, now they're not better. Jaguars 36, Colts 19. Usually we start with the winning team here, but I think we have to start with the biggest story coming out of this game, which is on the Indianapolis Colts side. Daniel Jones goes down early in this one with a non-contact injury on the leg that he is not currently dealing with, the broken fibula. He reaches for it as he's going down, the Achilles, the calf. Jones immediately slams his helmet down on the turf. The trainer's going to have to back away because he's so upset about it. And this one, Shane Steichen said after the game, could be season ending. It's not looking good. I would be surprised if we don't find out on Monday that Daniel Jones tore his Achilles. That's what I think we're looking at here. And they ruled him out quickly with that Achilles injury. And Chris, this is so brutal for a variety of different reasons. One, Jones is a free agent this offseason. That's part of it. He was set to probably get $100 million. Tough to imagine that's happening off a torn Achilles. The Colts are in the playoff race. They're now likely starting 6th-round rookie Riley Leonard for the foreseeable future. We'll talk about what we saw from him today, because Anthony Richardson is on IR with that orbital fracture injury that he got in pregame warmups. James Boyd said today, the reporter we just showed there for The Athletic, he said, I've seen Anthony Richardson, and I don't think we're seeing him, what his eye looks like, and I don't think we're seeing him anytime soon. So that's ominous. Also, the Colts don't have a first-rounder for the next 2 years because they went all in on this build of the team with Daniel Jones with the Sauce Gardner trade. So just a brutal break all the way around for Indianapolis and for Daniel Jones, who is having a really strong season as the starting quarterback.
I know, and of course, throughout the first 2 months of the season, it just looked like Jones had been completely rehabilitated from the guy that we had seen almost 2 seasons ago, taking multiple sacks, multiple turnovers on a per-game basis, and going from what we saw of him when his tenure with the Giants ended to essentially turning around into the QB1 for the Colts, and now seeing this happen. Yes, I know over the previous 2 to 3 weeks, he was taking more sacks, throwing some more turnovers, and the concerns about him turning back into a pumpkin were starting to be just a larger part of the Colts discourse. But of course, there was chances for him to turn it around. The Colts were still going to have at least a shot at getting into the playoffs, or were definitely going to be moving in that direction with the way that their seasonal trajectory was going. And so now for this to happen, and yeah, because I saw like shortly after he sustained the injury, it looked like he tried to get up, but then he couldn't even flex
Yeah,
his
couldn't.
ankle or anything like that. And then he sat back down. Of course, then you see the frustration afterwards. So no, just an absolute brutal sequence for not just the Colts, but Daniel Jones, and of course the rest of the offense as well, which we thought, again, through the first 2 months of the season, anybody attached to that offense, from the wide receivers that we wanted to draft in Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, and Tyler Warren, but even the ancillary guys that like Alec Pierce that we didn't even think about as being such a, I would say, pivotal or like a potential like, useful wide receiver, also starting to shine in this offense. But now all of that comes crashing down in just one play.
What do you think about Riley Leonard in this game? 18 of 29. He didn't throw a touchdown, did throw an interception in this one. I mean, I don't know. What'd you think of the Riley Leonard experience?
Again, I'll use your phrase from last week twice today, and I'll say, yeah, it was functional. I guess it may be a term you could toss around. I mean, 7 of 9 on third downs. I mean, 5 passing first downs. Now, I know that that was mostly once the Jaguars had run up the score. So, sure, there might have been a little bit of garbage time-esque, in terms of the way the defense was playing.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's where it's like I'm not trying to lean too far into it, but if you are looking for somebody to at least help you keep the lights on in terms of, yeah, can I get a few targets to Michael Pittman? Okay, fine. Am I going to get a few targets to Tyler Warren? Okay, fine. Same with Alec Pierce. I mean, Pittman, he got 12 targets in this game, but 5 of them came in the fourth quarter. So it's like, okay. I would at least be somewhat optimistic about just that type of production, but still, it's not something that I'm trying to bank on throughout the rest of the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, we'll have more conversations throughout the week as we break down the fallout from this injury for sure. But I think that Riley Leonard, I was texting with Nate about this because he was like a Riley Leonard truther in last year's draft class. And I was like, hey, buddy, Drake May's having a great season. Your boy Fernando Mendoza obviously having a big time season for the college. He might be the number 1 pick in the draft. And Nate was really early on that one. I was like, let's see what Riley Leonard can do. Let's see how close you can fly to the sun with your quarterbacks right now. And I mean, we were talking just about him really briefly. And I said, hey, maybe he's like a dollar store Daniel Jones with how Nate was kind of describing him. He can run. We saw him run for a touchdown here. Got the ball out quick to Michael Pittman. He was operating the quick game pretty well, but I think the downfield stuff is going to be really, really rough with Riley Leonard going forward. So again, I imagine we'll be heavily featured tomorrow on our Trust Meter show on Monday as we talk about this team. But yeah, just a brutal break for the Colts here. But let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars currently leading the AFC South. I think this is a pretty good Trevor Lawrence game here. I'm not saying it was perfect or anything, but Next Gen Stats notes that Lawrence particularly effective on downfield passes, 8 of 16 attempts of 10-plus air yards for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. His second most downfield passing yards in a game this season. Also effective throwing on the run, completing 5 of 6 attempts for 49 yards and 1 of his touchdowns here. So Travis Etienne had a big game. Basil Tutin got hurt early, did come back in the game, but Travis Etienne obviously had the big fantasy day. But I thought this was a pretty good game from Trevor Lawrence and several of the pass catchers here.
Yeah, 0.41 EPA per dropback for Trevor Lawrence. That's a high mark for the season for Trevor. And it wasn't just the fact that we're seeing some of the crossing routes and intermediate shots to Jacoby Myers, who I'm pretty much looking at as the wide receiver 1 for the Jaguars passing game.
Yeah.
But I would say but I kind of expected that out of Myers, just seeing how well he had instantly transitioned into this offense. 30% of the targets in his second week there, and about over 30% in this game as well. But honestly, the thing that stuck out to me was how quick or how well he was able to connect with Brian Thomas Jr. on some of those vertical routes, because that was the thing that I think was missing throughout most of the season, and just trying to find out, okay, well, how can we really use Brian Thomas Jr.? Like, what are the routes or what are the concepts that can work best between him and Trevor? And so seeing him connect a few times, I mean, BTJ averaged over 20 air yards per target in this game. So while it's something of a volatile play to expect this on a week in, week out basis, but at least for the Jaguars moving forward, they get the Jets, Broncos, and then the Colts again. So it's possible, at least for Brian Thomas, to maybe sneak into like that wide receiver 3 type conversation where I have more confidence in Myers, but at least BTJ is a little bit back on the radar for me after today.
Love that point, Chris. That was exactly what I was thinking watching this game as well. That, yeah, like Jacoby Myers remains the guy in terms of he's running a route on over 90% of the dropbacks. He's getting 10 targets. He's getting end zone targets, 2 end zone targets on the day. Tim Patrick had 4 red zone targets. We had a lot of usage from Tim Patrick here. By the way, we're also finding out just now, was just announced by Adam Schefter, that Daniel Jones is going to undergo surgery for a torn Achilles. So as expected there. But on these Jaguars wide receivers, yeah, Tim Patrick played a lot with Parker Washington not playing in this one. And that was key too, because Tim Patrick moving around between inside out. Jacoby Myers moving between inside out, and Brian Thomas Jr. essentially just playing 81% of his snaps outside, mostly as the on-ball X receiver and running a lot of vertical routes, out routes, go routes, stuff like that. That's the diet that he needs to have, because it didn't work for him early in the year going over the middle zone coverage, as he was, I think, number one, just dealing with injuries. Number two, dealing with like the change in this offense and putting more on him. It just didn't really go well from that perspective. So they're trying to find these ways to build him up, to pour into him. And my point on Brian Thomas is like, this is not a guy that they should be thinking about trading in the offseason. This is a guy they should think about finding ways to use in this offense and building up. And I like to see what we saw in this one. So I think 2025 is going to be a lost season for Brian Thomas. And like we're celebrating 87 scoreless yards here today. That's fine. But we're talking about, can he be a bounce back player in 2026 and beyond? I absolutely think so. And performances like this with this type of usage, it's a big part of the variables here, Chris.
Oh, 100%. Because now, if you think about this in 2026, you have essentially, because I'm not assuming Jacoby Myers is going to be long for this offense. So let's say they get Travis Hunter back. Travis Hunter can do most of the stuff, or we're assuming he'll develop into the receiver that can do most of the things that Jacoby Myers is doing for their offense right now. And then now you layer in Brian Thomas and his development and how quickly and how much his rapport continues to develop with Trevor Lawrence. And so I can see this 2026 Jaguars offense really hitting the ground running into like next season, where they have both wide receivers that can work not just across the middle of the field with Travis Hunter, but also have the deeper parts of the field as well with Brian Thomas Jr.
We'll see if Myers is brought back or not. I mean, he's obviously playing a huge role for this team right now, and he's been a perfect fit for exactly what they need, is the zone beater over the middle. It did drop a pass today, and that's obviously a part of the talk all year long with the Jaguars wide receivers. But still, generally, he has strong hands going over the middle and being where he's supposed to be. But if this team goes on a playoff run, and right now they are winning the division, we'll see what the Texans do tonight against the Chiefs as we're recording this. That game obviously hasn't happened right now. But, if he goes on a playoff run and has a nice, like, he might price himself out of Jacksonville because they have so many resources dedicated to wide receiver, and they do have some decent depth here. So maybe he's there, maybe he's not. I've been assuming that he's going to re-sign with the team, but you could be right where he goes elsewhere this offseason. And then look, like, we all got the Jags wide receivers wrong this year. I was way excited about Brian Thomas in this offense. Wrong about that. Obviously really excited about Travis Hunter as a rookie. Wrong about that. But maybe it's year 2 for these guys. We always want it to be microwave, but maybe it's a little bit of a slow cooker for these Jacksonville wide receivers. But I think for Brian Thomas, finding out what he does well and Myers being a big part of that alone makes this trade pretty enticing to me. So I thought this was an encouraging day for Brian Thomas Jr. Okay, that does it for the games we sort of care about. Now let's get into our big takeaways from the games we sort of care about here. Starting with Saints 24, Bucks 20. Panthers, baby. Panthers could win the NFC South. This puts a lot of pressure on those 2 games down the stretch. Tampa Bay losing this one. On the New Orleans Saints side, though, Chris, like, Tyler Shuck has not been perfect, but he is 8th in passing yards since week 12. And he showed some real juice as a runner today, in addition to fellow rookie Devin Neal handling 80% of the running back touches and 71% of the snaps and also getting to the end zone. Like, Tyler Shuck is playing some pretty decent ball here for this Saints team.
Yeah, he had 1 scramble and 6 design runs, and I honestly didn't pay too much attention to how much he was being used as a rusher, mostly because I just always get annoyed when they would pull Taysom Hill in. But Next Gen Stats had Tyler Shuck. Yeah, like Tyler Shuck, Next Gen Stats had him at 19.4 miles per hour on his first scramble for a touchdown. Hey, dude can boogie a little bit. So I am kind of wondering though if this is kind of the impetus for Kellen Moore to take a look at this offense and say, all right, I tried doing the Taysom Hill thing. I've actually got a guy that can move. He can throw the ball well enough to get to his wide receivers that you don't necessarily have to do the Taysom Hill stuff anymore. I mean, yeah, he was running around a route on about a third of the dropbacks and playing around like 40% of the snaps.
Oh
But
my gosh.
I'm not really thinking that this is going to be the same stuff that we've seen in years past, where once they get into the red zone, Taysom Hill is going to come in and try and steal the looks and get into the end zone. I really do think with the way that Chuck is playing, there's enough juice there for him to really have the starting job to himself.
Yeah, let's hope, man. I mean, enough already with Taysom Hill, please. But I think Tyler Shuck continues to show enough to be in consideration to be this team's starting quarterback in 2026. Like, you spent the 40th overall pick on him. I think he would have had to be terrible for them to completely flush this season down the drain. And so far, he's been far more than terrible. That is for sure. Terrible loss, though, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this one. And man, Bucky Irving was great here from a fantasy standpoint. 15 carries, 2 catches, a touchdown on a screen pass. That was awesome. Otherwise, though, man, this passing game is still way too out of sorts. Baker Mayfield is very up and down, was not good against man coverage here today. Next Gen Stats notes that the Saints played man coverage season high 37% in their Week 14 win over the Bucs. Baker Mayfield completed just 3 passes for 19 yards against man coverage here. And Emeka Egbuka, man, I maybe I should have put him in the coping corner. But he continues to leave plays on the field. Like, drops have been a big problem. We're showing the quote on the screen here from Baker Mayfield told Emeka Egbuka to keep his head up after the drop that would have been the game-tying touchdown. He said, quote, telling people to catch the ball doesn't do anything. They're not trying to drop it, just told him to, pick his head up. I will say that was not a good ball from Baker. It didn't need to be like hey, he's got to go up and get it, extend as we're showing on the screen now. It would have been hey, he's going right into the end zone if he catches that ball. It would have gone right into the end zone if it had been a more accurate pass. But still, that's a pass that a first-round wide receiver who was one of the best wideouts to start the NFL season, he's got to catch that. And there's been too many plays like that for Egbuka in the second half of his rookie season. So no question, Baker needs to be better. He needs to be better. They need to get some of these other receivers back to kind of get Egbuka out of this X receiver role that he's kind of stuck in because of the other guys in the roster. But man, Chris, the Bucs passing game, it's been very, very volatile in the second half of the year.
It was also volatile in the first part of the season, but a lot of that volatility was being covered up by the fact that Egbuka was catching some of those long touchdowns. I was looking at his Baker's completion percentage over expected coming into this week. Baker was 27th in CPOE, 29th in adjusted completion percentage on the season. That's even before kickoff today. So it has been one of those things where, yes, I mean, we've liked the touchdowns. We've loved to see Egbuka getting in there. Even when the rest of the guys were starting to pitch in, Mike Evans in the earlier parts of the season, Cade Otton throughout the middle parts of the season, of course, Bucky Irving. But really, a lot of that has been covered up by a lot of those explosive plays where they've been able to pull out those wins. Baker has been able to scramble for 10, 15, 20 yards or however much it's been. It's those big plays that's really kept us invested, but at the same time, there's just been, I don't know, something about the foundation of this offense that's just been a little off throughout the year, and we're kind of seeing that play out here in this game because Egbuka, to a lot of your points, I mean, 14.7 air yards per attempt. It's like, where is the consistency in terms of how he's going to be deployed on the field? I know that Chris Godwin being back kind of ruffles a lot of the feathers of seeing how Egbuka could really produce, but it's until we can find some level of consistency for him, and now we got Mike Evans potentially coming back next week, it's going to be hard to call or hard to trust any of these guys in week 15 and beyond.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult. They'll be a tough one to trust that man, it's such a bummer for how this season started for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that I feel like Baker is one of those live by the sword, die by the sword quarterbacks. And right now there's been a lot more dying than living on that sword so far in the second half of the year. Okay, let's get to the next game here. I fully expected to put this game in the email section of the proceedings, and yet it became a little bit too much to put it there. Titans 31, Browns 29. Yes, that's right. The Titans win a game and get out of the email section. And Tony Pollard gets off the schneid, the biggest, the coldest stretch you've ever seen from a starting running back. I've mentioned that a ton on this show. Well, he told me to shut the hell up because Tony Pollard scores 28.1 fantasy points in this game. Chris, he had exactly 28.1 fantasy points in his previous 5 games combined. I could not believe that that was true, but I looked it up. I was like, how long can I go back? How many games can I add of previously to get him close to this? And I added up the previous 5 in half PPR, and it was 28.1. Unbelievable. He had 90 yards before contact in this game, which I did not think was going to be possible against the best run defense in the NFL in Cleveland.
Tony Pollard puts up the 11th most rushing yards of any running back in a single game this season. But on top of that, that's the most of any running back to face Cleveland so far. I mean, the most was Derrick Henry when the Ravens played him, and Henry only put up 103. This guy's better than Derrick Henry, apparently, when he faces Cleveland. I had no idea that was going to be the case. Yeah, I mean, 5.88 adjusted yards after contact per attempt. I would say that if there was any hope, because I was looking at Tajay Spears as a guy that you could potentially use as like a high-end RB3 in a PPR league for the amount of receptions that he was getting on a week-in, week-out basis. He could give you a floor if you needed to get by. But after this game, I think it's pretty much kills any chance of Spears really taking over or having a larger part of this backfield after seeing such this, I don't know, complete outburst from Tony Pollard.
Yeah, our buddy Ian Hartitz puts it well. Tony Pollard doing nothing all season before going for 152 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Browns' league best run defense is what fantasy football is all about. And again, hats off to Ian. Couldn't have said it any better myself. I got nothing to say about the passing game in Tennessee because, I mean, Cam Ward had a couple nice moments here, but we're not really considering any of those passing game players from a fantasy standpoint. Speaking of rookie quarterbacks, though, Shedeur Sanders, pretty damn good game here. He's QB2, I believe, on the week next to Josh Allen, or at least he was in the early game slate here. Shedeur posted career highs across the board, 364 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 29 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown in the week 14 loss to the Titans. His main man was Harold Fannin, who recorded a season-high 60 yards after the catch. He now has 329 yards after catch this season, 5th most among tight ends. He's second on the team with an 85% route participation. I think we're probably not talking enough because he plays for the Browns about just what an unbelievable season Harold Fannin is having for a rookie tight end. And he's just dusted David Njoku. I mean, David Njoku he caught a touchdown in this game, actually, but he's a distant memory at this point, and Harold Fannin has been the best part of this Browns passing offense for sure. And like I said, hats off to Shedeur Sanders, who had a pretty awesome game in this one.
Yeah, and a quick recap on the for the Titans real quick in Cam Ward. Do you see the play? It almost looked like the Anthony Richardson play from last year where he shucked off a defender and then hucked it downfield to Alec Pierce. I think it was in week 1 of last season. But Cam Ward had a similar play where Grant Delpit is hanging off of him, and Cam Ward tossed him to the ground. He didn't complete the pass, but he was able to at least throw an incomplete and not take a massive sack. But I was like, man, that was actually like a solid athletic play from Cam Ward. But flipping over to the Sanders side of it, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it was good to see it. 364 passing yards from Sanders. That's the 12th most of any starter in a single game this season. I will say, though, this is going to make I'm pouring cold water on it, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to tell everybody that right now. So if you're a Browns fan or Sanders fan, just clip this part of the podcast or put me on mute. 238 of his 364 passing yards came after the catch. That's 65% of them. Okay? So I'm just putting that out there that's a fact. And then, okay, now we'll go to the positive parts. Harold Fannin, you already mentioned him. And David Njoku, he went down with a knee injury, I believe, after he caught that touchdown pass. But afterwards, it was, I mean, absolutely Fannin dominating the targets and also getting the targets in the area of field where they're mostly layups. I mean, 6.7 air yards per target, dominated the slot targets. So really, if I were to trust any of the Browns passing game moving forward, it would be Fannin. Because I know folks might look at Jerry Jeudy popping up and like seeing him like when he caught the 40-yard touchdown or something along those lines. I mean, it was good to see him involved, especially after there were shots of him and Sanders arguing on the sidelines last week. But I'm not looking at Jerry Jeudy as a potential start or even a flex option in weeks 15 and beyond. They've got the Bears, the Bills, and also the Steelers up ahead of them. So now I'd rather let's just take the goodness out of Fannin and seeing what he's doing in his rookie season, and let's just go from there.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair in terms of the Jerry Jeudy fantasy stuff. I mean, obviously there's so much Shedeur Sanders weirdness on the internet. One of which is that like which Browns player or coach can we say is sabotaging Sanders? And Jerry Jeudy last week, it's like, oh, he's sabotaging Shedeur Sanders. No, bro, folks, that's just Jerry Jeudy. I don't know if you're familiar with Jerry Jeudy's NFL career, but a very up and down player is Jerry Jeudy. So I don't know if he's somebody I'm like rushing to trust, but yeah, there were weird. Speaking of weird, there were weird reports over the weekend about the Browns are keeping Deshaun Watson on the roster next year. And, it's not just because of money. It's because he's been a real veteran leader for this young quarterback room. And, I mean, shoot, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that seems a little odd to me. There was a part of me reading that being like, oh, my God, what if if it's a Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson quarterback room in 2026 for the Cleveland Browns and they punt a year on quarterbacks because they just don't like any at the top of the draft or whatever. And, I mean, with a performance like this from Shedeur Sanders, I'm at least willing to be open-minded about it. And I don't know. Whatever. Who cares? Let's move on. Let's move on from everything I just said. Unless you've got a hot take about the Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders QB room of dreams in 2026, I think we can move on to an NFC West matchup here. Rams 45, Cardinals 17 on this one. On the Rams side of it, dynamic day from their passing offense. They were just consistently getting chunks on first and second down, moving the freaking football down the field. We got a monster Puka Nacua game. He was back 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford wasn't just 8 of 10 for 170 yards and 3 touchdowns on throws of 10-plus air yards. He also completed all 3 of his passes for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns on 20-plus air yard throws, according to Next Gen Stats. So the Rams basically got whatever they wanted in the passing game here. And it was Blake Corum who showed up with 2 touchdowns on the day. And if you just look in the first, second, and third quarter, it's been that same split between Kyren Williams, who had 97 yards from scrimmage in the first 3 quarters, and Blake Corum, 83 yards from scrimmage in the first 3 quarters. Roddy Rivers got involved in garbage time in the fourth quarter. That's why I'm cutting that quarter out. But Blake Corum showing why he's a really valuable player, Chris, that is too low rostered because he got into the end zone, he's got some standalone value, and he is clearly Kyren Williams' direct backup.
Exactly, and he was another guy that I highlighted in the numbers live segment earlier because folks will look at the snap counts and be like, well, he's just a limited player. Yeah. He's only playing around 40% of the snaps, so I can't really bank on it. But where is he getting used at? His first touchdown came from the goal line. He had handled 71% of the team's goal line carries in the previous 4 games. So if you know that once they get into scoring position, if Matthew Stafford isn't trying to throw a fade route to Davante Adams, it's probably going to go to Blake Corum, and he's going to be the one carrying the ball and getting into the end zone. And so that type of usage we saw in the first half of the game. But then afterwards, when it was clear that the Rams were taking out essentially all of their Week 13 frustrations on the Cardinals, well, they're just going to run roughshod over that Cardinals defense, and that's where you saw the explosive nature from Blake Corum. And actually, we saw a similar explosive run from Corum in Week 13 against the Panthers, but now when you tack on the touchdowns, when you tack on how little pushback that the Cardinals are giving him, this is where you get this type of performance. So if you aren't already rostering Blake Corum just for the contingent upside, if something were to happen to Kyren Williams, it's this type of performance that he should at least be, I would say, in flex consideration just because of where the Rams deploy him when they get into scoring position and also for the pass game usage as well.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Like, again, he should just absolutely be on more rosters than he is right now. He only played 36% of the snaps in the first 3 quarters, and yet he split that goal line work with Kyren Williams. So to your point, the snap count is not what matters here for Blake Corum. He's getting valuable touches. You mentioned the Cardinals did not give them any pushback. That is true, but they pulled off that scam, baby. Once again, Jacoby Brissett dropped back 50 freaking times in this game and attempted 44 passes. The scam continues, and it was another monster Michael Wilson game without Marvin Harrison Jr. Since Week 11, Michael Wilson leads the NFL with 56 targets, 39 catches, and 481 receiving yards. He's got 3 games without Marvin Harrison Jr. and 1 with Marvin Harrison Jr. Chris, there's a lot to talk about with this Michael Wilson stuff, but to me, it's as simple as this. When you've got an offense that is dropping back an absurd 50 times in a game, and you've only got 2 players to throw the football to, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, that's it. This is what you get. This is what you get. And Michael Wilson's legitimately good. I mean, he is a legit good receiver. I've written him up for reception perception. People can check out the charting profile on the site. The guy is great against man press coverage. He's a real deal receiver. It's just when it's three guys, you're not going to get these monster consolidated target games. When it's two, this is what you get here. And as long as Marvin Harrison's not out there, Michael Wilson needs to be in your fantasy lineup.
Oh, 100%. If not for the volume, but as we've now seen for essentially a month's worth of games, how well and how efficient that Michael Wilson can be on those types of targets. I mean, whether it's the hitch routes or the comeback routes or whatever, those timing routes and that level of in sync that he has with Jacoby Brissett, you see that game in and game out when it's him not having to have Marvin Harrison contest for some additional targets as well. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, seeing how quickly they were able to establish that connection and seeing how well that Michael Wilson has been able to perform, I mean, this is going to be more of a long-term thing because I thought there were at least some underlying rumors that this might be more than just a 1 week absence for Marvin Harrison. This is a guy that Michael Wilson, rather, he should be a guy that's going to have to be in your lineup regardless of the matchup, just for how well he's been playing and how often Jacoby Brissett looks his way.
Yeah, production lies sometimes with wide receivers, and that has certainly been the lie here for the Arizona Cardinals wide receiver room. There's some good players here. There's some really good players here. Just we're now seeing it in the fantasy scam. That is for sure that Jacoby Brissett is running there in Arizona. Let's get to the next game here, our final game of this section. Seahawks 37, Falcons 9. Frankly, this game could have been an email, honestly. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this one. But crazy stat from NFL Pro on Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has joined Tom Brady, yes, that Tom Brady, as the only quarterbacks to win 10-plus games in consecutive seasons with two different teams, going 14-3 as the starter with Minnesota in 2024 before his success this season with the Seahawks, who are currently 10-3. So that's right, folks. Sam Darnold, Tom Brady, basically the same player. Sam Darnold was effective against the blitz here in this one. They called man blitzes a lot, did the Atlanta Falcons, and he completed 6 of 8 passes for 75 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is not usually the case for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, the first half was something of concern, minus 0.51 EPA per dropback in that first half, 2 sacks and an interception. So there was, I would say, the slow start for the Seahawks. I mean, especially not seeing JSN really start to get cooking until this the third quarter. I mean, that's where, again, if you were rostering either one of those two and kind of looking for that instant explosion after the down week in week 13, you just had to wait a little bit. Afterwards, of course, you see the 2 touchdowns to Jackson Smith and Jigba. But the other thing that stuck out to me, 5 targets for Rashid Shaheed. We had talked a couple of times beforehand on the recap shows about how little we had seen going Shaheed's way. I don't know if this is going to be a consistent thing moving forward, but at the very least, he's not a guy that I would say is a priority pickup for Week 15, but at least he's, I would say, a little bit on my radar. Maybe somebody that if I see him on the waiver wire after all the waivers go through, so on Wednesday, Thursday, I might think about adding him to our roster. But past that, it's just good to see him getting more involved.
Yeah, ran a route on 68% of the dropbacks, so didn't get a big promotion here. I've basically just decided that they would never have made this trade if Torrey Horton didn't suffer that injury after his breakout game. And that's kind of the explanation for why he hasn't really been more of a priority player. It wasn't like, oh, we need to proactively go get Rashid Shaheed. It's like, we need to get a receiver to fill Torrey Horton's role because he might not play again this season. So I did like what we saw here, though. I don't know that he'll ever run more routes than Cooper Kupp. Like, Cooper Kupp is just important to what they do as a blocker and all that sort of stuff. But to see Rashid Shaheed actually be involved, though, was a really encouraging sign for the Seahawks, at least in the playoffs and all of that, even if it doesn't help us in fantasy. Speaking of helping us with fantasy, Kyle Pitts, buddy, he has kind of been the guy for this. I mean, look, the Falcons' offense was atrocious in this one. The passing game in particular was disgusting. But with 6 catches for 90 yards today, Kyle Pitts now, since Drake London went down, he has the 3 games without Drake London, 23 targets the last 3 weeks without Drake London, 15 catches for 197 yards. So it's quietly, I'm not going to say it's happening with Kyle Pitts, but it's something is happening with Pitts.
It's something. I think that's the best way to describe it, because this was also in a game where Darnell Mooney gets a touchdown called back because he didn't reestablish himself inbound, so that one got wiped off the board. So it was just the Falcons' passing game as a whole was just nothing really to write home about. But yeah, to your point, 25%, 26%, and now up to a 30+% target rate for Kyle Pitts over these last 3 weeks without Drake London in the lineup. So if this is going to be a continued absence, yeah, I'm sure folks will probably, I'm sure this is what's going to happen. I'm already calling it right now. We're going to get questions about him next week, and everybody's going to want to play him next week, and then that's the week that he duds out. I can
Yeah.
already see this happening right now because we're looking at projected targets. We're looking at bankable production. We'll even have the narrative, assuming Drake London sits, that Kirk Cousins can't throw to anybody else, but it's probably going to be David Sills for 2 touchdowns or something like that next week. I can already see this happening.
So much just hurt and emotional damage that you've got there with Kyle Pitts. We can all hear it in your voice on that one. And you know what? We've all been there. That's for sure. All right. That does it for the games that we sort of care about. Now let's get into the games that could have been an email here. We've got 3 ones to get through, starting with Broncos 24, Raiders 17. On the Broncos side of it, a couple of interesting notes here. RJ Harvey has a nice game. He has 74 yards on the ground. He has 6 receptions as well. So actually a huge fantasy game for RJ Harvey. The concern for him, Chris, is not in this game against the damn Raiders. The concern is in some of the matchups down the stretch and some of the up and down play from him. But we all knew he was going to have a good game in this one. And it didn't matter much for fantasy, but like to see some more from Pat Bryant as well in this one as he continues to, I think, be more of a priority player than Troy Franklin at this point in the offense.
Yeah, I think my only other takeaway was good to see Cortland Sutton popping up for the high amount of targets that he did in this game, where it's been something of an up and down season for him as the team's wide receiver one, because we've seen those flashes from Troy Franklin and, like you just mentioned, Pat Bryant popping up. And then Marvin Mims, while he didn't catch a touchdown, he was more of a special teams player than anything else. So seeing Sutton essentially try and reestablish himself as the team's wide receiver one, at least that gives me a bit more confidence about what he could be in weeks 15, 16, and 17.
No doubt about that. Pat Bryant, 65% route participation. Cortland Sutton leads the way with 81%. Troy Franklin all the way down at 37%. 4 targets, 1 drop in this one. So for the Franklin stuff, I think is over at this point in fantasy, beyond over. But what might not be over, Dynasty, the Besh Bros. We've got some hopium from this game. I mean, look, Kenny Pickett played in this game for the Raiders. We don't need to do a deep run on the Raiders. It's as bad as it possibly could be for the Raiders. So Kenny Pickett, that happened. But the Raiders allowed Jack Besh to be one of the top 3 pass catchers, ran around on 84% of the dropbacks, and he leads the team in targets and catches. So just a little hopium for the Besh Bros like myself, the Dynasty managers of Jack Besh, that his very unfair treatment, his rookie, very, very unfair treatment in his rookie season might finally be over. I don't even know how much is serious versus joking with the Besh stuff at this point anymore, but I'm hoping to see a little bit from him down the stretch. We saw a lot from the Dolphins in this one. Dolphins 34, Jets 10. Devon Achane didn't even need a full day to dominate this matchup. But Jalen Wright then also, after Devon Achane got hurt after 92 rushing yards and 13 through the air, Jalen Wright then comes in and carries the ball for 24 times for 107 yards and a touchdown. So not a great game from the Jets run defense. Let's just say that.
Ollie Gordon got in for a rushing touchdown as well, so it's just everybody started to pile on. It's like when the Steelers tight ends all scored against my Bengals. It's just like everybody got in the box afterwards. But it was good to hear after the game Mike McDaniel saying that he held Achane out and he was only going to be the emergency running back. So he should be ready for Week 15. I saw a couple of beat writers also noting they saw Achane in the locker room, had a couple of bandages on his ribs, but otherwise he was walking around fine. Didn't seem like he was going to be potentially limited or anything like that for Week 15. My only other note was I talked up Darren Waller earlier today. It looked like today he was splitting the routes with Greg Dulcich. 59.1% route rate for Waller and around 54.5% for Dulcich. So both of them got a few targets. So, I mean, right now with the way that the Dolphins are using Waller, he's really more wide receiver than anything else. I mean, not really seeing a lot of running a ton of routes from the slot, playing more on the outside. But again, that schedule that we would probably want to have at least some useful tight end in our lineups. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, even the Bucks in Week 17. So solid schedule, but the hope would be that in this one, the targets would start to consolidate around one of those tight ends, but we really didn't get that in this matchup.
On the Jets side of things here, We said this at the end of the show on Fantasy Football Live this morning because we kept getting Adonai Mitchell start sit questions. We had you and Boone had a whole segment about him. Boone was answering a lot of questions about Adonai Mitchell, and I said, what could possibly go wrong as everybody's talking about AD Mitchell? Well, guess what went wrong? Tyrod Taylor gets hurt after 4 dropbacks. He leaves the game, and someone named Brady Cook finished as the team here we're showing on the screen here that the Underdog account tweeted out that ESPN doesn't even know who's throwing him, and they had an unknown player on the depth chart at one point because Brady Cook, whatever. Brady Cook completed 46.7% of his passes in this one. He was tied with Kirk Cousins for the lowest EPA on his dropback or EPA per dropback here. Tough stuff. If you started at AD Mitchell today, we're sorry. We cursed him with the Tyrod Taylor injury early on in the game. There was another player, though, who tied for the lowest EPA per dropback this week. That was Jaden Daniels, Washington Commanders quarterback, because his team got blown the F out here. Vikings 31, Commanders 0 in this one. We'll talk about McCarthy in a second, but man, Chris, a cursed season for Jaden Daniels because he gets hurt after an interception in this one, just gets blown up. And, just nothing happens for this Commanders team against the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and it's not just him. Zach Ertz goes down with what was most likely going to be an ACL tear. I mean, because that play actually that looked horrible. Watching that in real time, seeing Ertz go down. I mean, even his teammates were audibly hurt and frustrated seeing that happen to one of their team leaders. So I mean, just a cavalcade of problems now for the Commanders in what is now definitely a lost season with both their QB1 and then also one of their top pass catchers likely being done for the season.
Yeah, Dan Quinn said that Jaden Daniels could have gone back in there, but he decided to hold him out, and then he said he could play again this season. I don't know. I was feeling pretty good about the Commanders after their loss to the Denver Broncos, but feeling pretty bad about him after this one. They scored 0 points. What can I say? On the other side of it, though, J.J. McCarthy did have a good game. We talked about it earlier. Any other thoughts on McCarthy here who, I wouldn't say he looked special or whatever, but a competent game from J.J. McCarthy, which is all we were asking for. And now he's got a chance to build on that momentum down the stretch because I don't think anybody's crying for Brosmer anymore. I don't think anybody wants to see anyone else. It's just McCarthy. What do you got down the stretch here?
Yeah, I think if this is going to be the type of formula for Kevin O'Connell and how he wants to have J.J. McCarthy operate the passing game, I mean, 6.7 air yards per attempt, which to me kind of makes sense because in those games where he was struggling, especially in the one against the Ravens, I mean, you were seeing Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson down the field. I mean, double-digit air yards per attempt, or per target for both those guys. So if this is going to be more of a controlled, nice, neat, short area to maybe slightly intermediate passing game for McCarthy, I get that. The only hope would be now let's bring the receiving air ADOTs for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison down in order to match that because those are the guys that can really access that after the catch ability that can really start to pull J.J. McCarthy into better passing games. So I like the plan. Let's just hope that in weeks 15 and beyond, it now starts to focus a bit more on the receivers and getting them more involved.
Yeah, and obviously you're going to face tougher challenges down the stretch than the Commanders defense. Although Dallas and New York the next 2 weeks, the New York Giants, so not that tough in terms of secondaries that you're going to have to throw against there. So some potential momentum here for J.J. McCarthy. Went 10 of 11 on quick throws according to Next Gen Stats in this game. Chris, we said it all. We did it all. We had some technical difficulties, but we got this one in the books. Appreciate you joining me as always, buddy.
Of course, man. Apologies for getting a late start, but again, just a wild week. And of course, from technology to football, I mean, the chaos never stops. But yeah, we'll be back here next week to recap everything again, brother.
No question. The chaos never stops here in the NFL universe, the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. We're always living in chaos. That's what we do here. On Monday, Justin Boone joins me for the first edition of the Trust Meter. That's right. No more panicking. That's over. Now it's time to decide who you can trust down the stretch for your fantasy playoff matchups. We will debate those players. We'll also have Boone rank the best backup running backs to stash for the fantasy postseason. That all happens right here, 5 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. We will see you all then. Until then, we are out.